الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده صاحب التاج والمعراج سيد الإنس والجنات مسؤول رب الأرض والسماوات الذي اسمه مكتوب في الإنجيل والتوراة. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد: ولا تقولوا لمن يقتل في سبيل الله أموات بل أحياء ولكن لا تشعرون. صدق الله العظيم. وقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم: من أحبهم فبحبي أحبهم ومن أبغضهم فببغضي أبغضهم. وخير القرون قرني ثم الذين يلونهم ثم الذين يلونهم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Alhamdulillah, it's a great honor and a blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are in the blessed month of Muharram. We are able to witness the blessed month of Muharram. And it's a great blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has made some times better than others, some moments better than others, so that we can really take these opportunities and get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, when you analyze the Quran and the Ahadith, you realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using these excuses, or giving us excuses rather, to get closer to Him. These things, these months that come again and again, we have Al-Hijjah, now we have Muharram, blessed months, we have Ramadan, these opportunities that come, there is, when you look at it, you feel like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is wanting us to take these opportunities to get closer to Him. That's how merciful our Lord is. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I think I've mentioned this in the last halaqah, just to look at the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have to read the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. When in a battlefield, I think I did mention this last time, in a battlefield, a mother, a battlefield of that time, arrows flying everywhere, swords, people killing each other. That's what a battlefield is. And there a mother has lost a child. Now this mother who's lost a child, she is running for this child from one end of the battlefield to the other end of the battlefield, not worrying about the arrows, about the swords, about dying, not worrying at all, because she's worried about her child. And every time she sees a child, she holds the child, hugs the child, kisses the child. And when she realizes this is not her child, she leaves the child and runs to look for her own child. Now Prophet ﷺ, looking at this scene, asked the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, that, do you ever think this mother could harm her child? To the nearest me. Sahaba said, no chance. This woman is dying for her child. She is not worrying about arrows. She's not worrying about death. Just to get her child, just to meet her child. So how would this woman harm her child? No chance. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at that time said, Allahu arhamu bi'ibadihi min hadihi liwaladiha. Allah is more merciful to His servants, us, than this mother is to her child. Subhanallah. So this is the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لما خلق الله الخلق, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything, He wrote in a preserved tablet, إِنَّ رَحْمَتِي سَبَقَتْ غَضَبِي, that my mercy has surpassed my wrath. My mercy comes first. Every time Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is merciful, everything about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is merciful. He gives you chance upon chance upon chance. And then, you also have to understand that if you don't take these chances, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is shadidul iqab. He is the one who will punish them. But He gives you a chance, and this mercy of Allah has surpassed His wrath. There are a lot of such examples. We know the famous example, the famous hadith of that man who had committed every single crime in the world. Every single sin that you can imagine, this man had committed. But at the time of his death, he was scared. He remembered, I have disobeyed the Lord. I've disobeyed Allah. So he asked his children to burn him. After he dies, to burn him. And all his ash, scatter it, some in the sea, some in the forest, some in the desert, just scatter it around the world. He was so scared. When he goes in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask him, why did you do this? He said, because I was scared, Ya Allah. I know obviously you can bring me back to life. I was just scared. I wanted to do my utmost to not come in front of you because I can't face you. I've done so many wrongs. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He's so merciful, He liked this gesture so much that He forgave him and He admitted him to Jannah. So this is the mercy of our Lord, and these opportunities that we get, Muharram al-Haram is here. Muharram itself, the meaning of the month Muharram is sacred. This is a very, very sacred month. And as we know, some of you must have fasted today, and tomorrow is Ashura. And the reward for Ashura is that your previous year's sins are forgiven. So this is an opportunity that we cannot really miss. We can't afford to miss this opportunity. And we should make full use of it. And the reason we fast on this month is when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when they did hijrah from Makkah al-Mukarramah to Medina al-Munawwarah, he found the Jewish people, they used to fast. And why they used to fast was because they believed, and because Musa alayhi salam and the Jews of that time, we consider Muslims, they were saved from Fir'aun on this day. So to celebrate that, or to thank Allah, they fast on this day. Now, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, we are ahaq. We have got more right over Musa alayhi salam than these people. So we will also fast. We will also fast on Ashura. And then before he passed away, he said, if I remain alive next year, I'll add a day to this fast in order to differentiate between the Jews and the Muslims. I always tell the Jewish friends of ours that we celebrate when you were saved. And you call us terrorists. Come on. We celebrate the day you were saved. We celebrate with you. So you should like us more, because we celebrate with you. We always celebrate. Not only do we celebrate for one day, we celebrate for 2 days. We only celebrate for 1 day. So sometimes, in a debate or in a discussion, interfaith discussion, you can use this. You can use the fact that we are very, very, peaceful people. It was a joke. You guys are not laughing. What's wrong with you guys? Every time I crack a joke, everyone laughs. It's wrong. You should stop cracking jokes or look for better jokes, I think. Anyway, now this Muharram al-Haram, there is one thing, we've got a lot of practices that have come about in Muharram al-Haram that that have got no basis in the Sharia, in the Quran and the Sunnah. A lot of people, especially people from the subcontinent, always, they consider it a month of sorrow or a month of, from a superstitious perspective, there's a lot of negativity about this month. And the reason is Hussain radiallahu anhu was martyred in this month. Now what we need to realize is, why do we fast in this month? I just told you. We are celebrating something. It's something good that has happened in the past. Fir'aun, the Muslim, Musa alayhi salam and his nation, they were saved from Fir'aun, the Israelites. They were saved from Fir'aun. So something good has happened, and that's why we are fasting. So good and bad can't be together. So, is that true? Good and bad can't be together. So what are we fasting because this month is wretched and this month is full of negative vibes or anything of that sort? No. We are fasting because this month is Muharram. It's sacred. So we celebrate this month. because this month is a good month, it's a blessed month. We worship extra. There are even narrations we get that you should spend on your family in this month because it's a blessed month. But we don't. Anytime, our religion, last time I did tell you, alhamdulillah, the era of the Sahaba, Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba, that era is the best era that we can use as a template. The reason being they were very, very practical. Very practical. That practicality is something that goes, any generation, any era could use this era as a template. The reason being they were very practical. There was no, superstitious sci-fi beliefs or supernatural beliefs. It was nothing like that. Very practical. They used to worship, they used to, work, they used to do ibadah, they used to also help out their family. This was very practical. And something that we can make use of in our lives. Sometimes when you read about stories that this man has, as I mentioned last time, this man has worshipped for so many years, he has prayed thousands of raka'ah, of nafil salah. Sometimes a person can get put off. This is not practical, I can't do this. I work 9 to 5. I'm in lectures, how am I going to do this? You have to aspire to do your best. But this doesn't seem practical. And this is not to say that awliya of Allah, our belief is they were great people, obviously they were, and each one of us can become a wali of Allah. We do believe that. However, the Sahaba, they had something about them. They were so practical. When you look at them, when you look at the things of the Sahaba, you feel like doing it. You feel like becoming like them. You feel, you aspire to become like them. It really rejuvenates your iman. It brings that freshness to your iman, to your own iman, to your spirituality. You feel uplifted when you read about the Sahaba. So they were really, really practical people. So that's why Islamically, when you mourn for someone, you mourn not more than 3 days. And how do you mourn? That's also weird. This is a way of life. We've been told everything, each and everything. Rasulullah ﷺ, there was not a stone left unturned. Every question has got an answer in our deen, alhamdulillah. So how do you mourn? You don't, beat yourself and slap yourself and, kill yourself. You don't do that. You don't hurt yourself. وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ. Do not put yourself in halakah. As in, do not harm yourself with your own hands. It's a verse of the Quran. How do we mourn is, we are sad, obviously. We are sad. If someone passes away, you're sad. But you don't prolong that for more than 3 days, and you don't beat yourself. Even, Rasulullah ﷺ has gone as far as to say that he who does that is not amongst us. It's a Sahih Hadith. That he who does no or mourns, beats himself, slaps his cheeks, hits themselves, he's not amongst us. So you don't mourn in this way. You mourn in a very, very dignified manner. You be dignified about it. Just common sense. Use your common sense. When you mourn like that, when you have demonstrations or processions and you're mourning like that, and you expect to give da'wah to people, when you give da'wah to people and they look at that, do you think they will come to Islam? Do you really think they will come to Islam looking at these people? What are they doing? They get scared. What are they doing? So our deen is very dignified. Very, very dignified. And this is not, listen, I'm not here to, be sectarian or, this is a time when we have this not, there's never been such a need of unity as we have today. I don't like sectarianism. But I'm going to be factual today. I'll tell you facts as they are. I'm talking to you and asking you to use your common sense. When you look at processions, when you look at demonstrations, when you look at people killing themselves, hitting themselves, cutting themselves, is that Islam? What does your own, your heart tell you? Is that Islam? That's not Islam. So Muharram al-Haram, if it was a month, wretched month, a month of mourning, we would have mourned Umar radiallahu anhu, who was martyred on the 1st of Muharram, who passed away on the 1st of Muharram. He passed away on the 1st of Muharram. No one even knows that. 10th of Muharram is when Hussain radiallahu anhu was martyred. Umar radiallahu anhu was martyred passed away on the 1st of Muharram. He was martyred, the first attack happened on the 28th of Al-Hijjah, but then he passed away on the 1st of Muharram. And Hussain radiallahu anhu was martyred on the 10th of Muharram. The point that I'm trying to make is, don't look at Muharram as the wretched month, or we're not superstitious people, we don't believe in such things. However, how you can look at it is, was Hussain radiallahu anhu was so great, Umar radiallahu anhu was so great, that they got the opportunity of giving their lives in the path of Allah in this blessed month. Now you look at it from this perspective, that they were such great people, they were amazing people, we loved them to bits. Hussain radiallahu anhu, we love him to bits. He was from Ahlul Bayt, he was from the family of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We love him to bits. And because of his status, he got martyrdom in the blessed month of Muharram, and not only in the blessed month of Muharram, on the blessed day of Ashura. Now this is the way to look at it. This is a better way of looking at it. So Karbala, the topic of today, Karbala, has really got nothing to do with the changing of dynamics of this month. You got to understand this. Muharram is not wretched because Hussain radiallahu anhu passed away. Muharram is not blessed because Hussain radiallahu anhu passed away in it. Muharram was blessed before this. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentioned about Muharram, mentioned about the fasting of Ashura before the Shahada of Hussain radiallahu anhu. So it was already a blessed day. Even there are some narrations, some very, very weak narrations, and I wouldn't really even, I wouldn't be quoting them. But there are weak narrations found that Adam alayhi salam was, his tawbah was accepted on Ashura, he came to this dunya on Ashura. There are a lot of things, about Ashura. However, they haven't got the strength that I'll advise you to quote them. There is a narration which is slightly stronger that Nuh alayhi salam, the Prophet Nuh, fasted on Ashura as well. So Ashura holds significance before the Shahada of Hussain radiallahu anhu. That has to be clear. Another thing, before I actually briefly touch upon Karbala, is an usul, a fundamental that I want you guys to remember. As-sahabatu kulluhum adul. This is a fundamental belief of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. This is a fundamental belief that Sahaba, the companions of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, kulluhum adul. They are all blessed. You can't challenge, or you can't challenge their character. You can't doubt their intention. You can never do that. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, radiyallahu anhum wa radu anhu, that I'm pleased with them and they're pleased with me. So if Allah says this, who are we to challenge? The Sahaba, they are kulluhum adul. We believe that. There are some decisions Sahaba took that, as I said, they were very practical people, and they were not ma'soom. Remember, they were not ma'soom. Anbiya, prophets are ma'soom, which means they're sinless. But Sahaba, they were practical people. They were, they were people like us. However, their iman and their status is much, much higher. Something we can only, dream of becoming. Because they were their tarbiyah. Who had done their tarbiyah? Who had brought them up from an Islamic, spiritually, who had brought them up? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So we can never match that. Even if we try our best, we can never match them. But from a practical perspective, we've got templates there to follow. We've got role models there to follow. The ultimate role model is Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, but we've got inspiration in the Sahaba. So there are people amongst the Sahaba who have made decisions that we can disagree with, which have got nothing to do with belief or nothing to do from a theological perspective. However, from say a political perspective, they have made decisions. We can disagree with them, but we cannot challenge, or we cannot argue, or we cannot doubt their intention or their character. Their intention would have been still right. It still would have been right. The intention was still for the betterment of the Ummah. The reason I'm saying this, keep these usul, these fundamentals in mind when reading about Karbala, or understanding about, or listening to Karbala. Just to take you some years before Karbala, we know Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu became the Caliph, became the Khalifa. And it was a pivotal moment, a time when, whenever you want to bring a nation down which has been successful, you target the leader. The leader goes, the nation goes. And this is what had happened. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, and naturally passed away. But people who were against Muslims or who were weak Muslims, they thought this is the time. Muslims are going to go downhill from now. It was the leadership of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu which saved the Ummah at that time. Sahaba had lost it. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had gone. They did not know anything better. They did not know what to do. Who do you go for if you have problems? Who do you go for if you want to ask something about Deen? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This man who had made them, who had brought them back to, becoming human. These people who used to kill each other for a petty argument. These people who used to bury their daughters alive. These people who had, not an ounce of humanity. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had made them human, had done the tarbiyah. Now Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has gone. People have lost it. The Sahaba, they did not know what hit them. This is when Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu came. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was a great man even before this. In the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we have numerous ahadith which shows the manaqib, the greatness of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. But that moment, that really showcased his character, that really showcased him, what his real status is. Because he kept the ummah together. And he, who was normally a very, very humble and a very calm person, was very, very strong at that time. And very, very strong, and at certain points he had to make some very, if I may use, I know it's got a negative connotation, aggressive, but strong, I would use the word strong decisions, against people who had given up Islam, against people who were not giving zakah. He was very, very strong, and very, very, very strong because he had to be. He was making the right decisions, keeping that time in mind. And after that, Umar radiallahu anhu came. Umar radiallahu anhu used that platform that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu had created, and Umar radiallahu anhu was the Khalifa. And then he progressed and progressed and progressed, and Islam was victorious. Islam was very, very strong. Again, enemies of Islam, whenever there is such kind of, a big revolution or a phase coming in, there's always counter-revolutionary, teams or small sort of rebellion. Always goes. It always happens. The trend of the world. It's always happened. So, you talk about any kingdom or any era or any regime, they always, when they have been so victorious, there's always been a counter-revolutionary forces that attack them. Now these people, when Islam was being victorious, there was a rebellion in Persia, and there was these counter-revolutionary forces against Umar radiallahu anhu, and they sent that Abu Lu'lu Feroz, who eventually killed Umar radiallahu anhu, and Umar radiallahu anhu passed away on the 1st of Muharram. Then came Uthman radiallahu anhu. Uthman radiallahu anhu, again he was martyred. There was a man called Abdullah ibn Sabah. This is very important. In order to understand Karbala, it's very important to understand his background. Abdullah ibn Sabah was a Jew. He was a Jewish man who, entered Islam, and he was a hypocrite. He was not really a Muslim. He was there to cause damage. He was there to damage Islam, but he pretended to become a Muslim. And then he realized that Uthman radiallahu anhu, he has been martyred. And before Islam, there has always been this rivalry between Banu Hashim, which is Prophet ﷺ's family, and Banu Umayyad. The Umayyads and the Banu Hashim. And Uthman radiallahu anhu was from the Umayyads. radiallahu anhu passed away, he thought this is the ample time to bring back that rivalry, to bring back that, in order to cause fitna, in order to cause a fight between these two, in order to weaken Islam, I need to create a fight between these two factions, between these two families. So then he brought up the fitna of Ali. He is Banu Hashim. He should be the Khalifa, and he on the other side told Umayyads that Uthman radiallahu anhu has been killed and his murder should be avenged. So he's creating this fitna and between Muslims, and it was one of the darkest chapters of Islamic history. A lot of people don't like to speak about it, but it has to be mentioned. As I said, the way you look at it is not at the weakness of the Sahaba, but you look at the fact that they were practical people, they could make mistakes, but at the same time, if you consider something haq, you stand by it. So then there was the big battles of Siffin and Jamal between Muawiyah radiallahu anhu and Ali radiallahu anhu. And the basis of it was created by Abdullah ibn Sabah. So the main culprit was this man who was pretending to be a Muslim. And this is where, as I said, I'm not here to be sectarian, however, I'm just mentioning facts. And when I use the term Shia, now, it is referring to a group. Shia in Arabic means group. And this is the start of, which eventually became the Shiaism of today. But Shia is what started it. Shia as in groups. It was merely, you could say, a political movement at that time, rather than a religious movement or a theological movement. It was merely a political movement. This is where it started. Now the Shia of Ali and the Shia of Muawiyah. So the group that backs Ali radiallahu anhu and the group that backs Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. Battles were fought. One of the darkest chapters in the history of Islam, and one of the saddest time in the history of Islam, because more Muslims died during this time than fighting the non-Muslims before that. 100,000, according to some books, more than 100,000 people died in this era. When this era finished, when Ali radiallahu anhu, it's good to mention here that Ali radiallahu anhu had some problems with his Shia. The Shia, who eventually, the other group weren't called the Shia, it was only Shia Ali or Shia of Ali, the group of Ali. The group of Ali gave him quite a lot of problems, which the Sahaba, eventually when Hussain radiallahu anhu was going to Karbala, they reminded Hussain radiallahu anhu that problem of remember, these are the same people who gave your father a lot of problems. And amongst that Shia were those people, remember who he was created by, Abdullah ibn Sabah. Amongst that Shia, again, Shia is the political movement that I'm referring to. Amongst those Shia were those people who considered Ali radiallahu anhu, he's becoming a bit, weak, or he's giving in to Umayyads. And then they became the Khawarij, another group, Khawarij. If you don't follow me, let me know, because it can get a bit confusing. So, if you have to ask any question in the middle, I don't mind. So, Khawarij were the people then who assassinated Ali radiallahu anhu, martyred Ali radiallahu anhu. When Ali radiallahu anhu was martyred by people from his own Shia, who had become Khawarij obviously, then Hassan radiallahu anhu becomes the Khalifa. Hassan radiallahu anhu, this has to be remembered. Subhanallah, what a great man. What a great man. What a leader. A leader that today's leaders or any leaders of any era can aspire to become like. Hassan radiallahu anhu, once Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was giving a khutbah, sermon. And Hassan radiallahu anhu walks, and he was young. He was really young. He was a toddler. And he trips. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam comes down and from giving a sermon stops. Imagine, I'm talking, I'm stopping, and goes, picks Hassan radiallahu anhu up and puts him, on his shoulder. And says that I couldn't bear to see him fall. And says that this son of mine, who's a grandson, son of mine is a Sayyid. He's a leader. And he will be a reason when two big forces, Muslim forces, will get together. This was a prophecy made years before this happened, what I'm going to tell you. Hassan radiallahu anhu was, there was, again, that even though it was kind of sorted, but that sort of tiff, if you would like to call it, between Muawiyah radiallahu anhu and the Umayyads and the Banu Hashim was still there. So Muawiyah radiallahu anhu wanted to become the Khalifa because he deemed himself fit. Again, as I said, we can't doubt their intention because his intention was the betterment of the Ummah. And Hassan radiallahu anhu and Muawiyah radiallahu anhu's armies were coming to clash. And this battle would have been much more bloodier than the battles before. So what did I tell you before? What happened? More than 100,000 people died. And this would have been bloodier than that. But Hassan radiallahu anhu, the reason I'm calling him one of the best leaders is he showed his leadership qualities. Nothing to do with my ego, betterment of the ummah. Look at the ummah, look at the nation, look at the community. That comes first, and then come on. Hassan radiallahu anhu resigned. And he resigned to save the Muslims. He said, I don't want any more bloodshed. I'm going to resign from my post. Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, you can become the Khalifa. Without any, and Muawiyah radiallahu anhu gave him a blank paper. Whatever you want to write, whatever shara'i you want to write, whatever conditions you want to write, you can write. But Hassan radiallahu anhu said, no condition, I want to resign. So this showed Hassan radiallahu anhu's greatness. And Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, which proved to be a very, very wise decision of him becoming the Khalifa, because next 20, 40 years were, there's a difference of opinion, were very, very peaceful. Very peaceful. Again, Muslims forgot the internal battles. I think it was 20 years. I'm getting a bit confused myself. 20 years. Next, I think you confused me when you were speaking to me. So, before, what happened was, they forgot their internal fights and they concentrated on propagating the deen. Again, the time, the blessed time of the Khulafa al-Rashidin that was there, it kind of continued from there. From Muawiyah radiallahu anhu's time, they conquered lands, they were victorious, the deen was spreading, and Muslims were strong once again. Then Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, what he did was, he did not want bloodshed. He did not. A lot of his Sahaba, they advised him that, if you don't nominate a deputy or a Khalifa after you, then what will happen is there will be again bloodshed, there will be infighting, etc., etc. There were people at that time who were much more worthy of giving the caliphate to. There was Hussain radiallahu anhu, there was more, Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, there was Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu. All these Sahaba, who were at the time of Prophet ﷺ, Yazid, remember, was not a Sahabi. By consensus. No one, disagrees, there's no difference of opinion. Yazid wasn't a Sahabi. He was born in the 22nd or 23rd of Hijri. He was not a Sahabi. He was not a companion. So, there were people who were worthy of giving the caliphate to. But Muawiyah radiallahu anhu chose Yazid as his successor. And he said, Yazid will be and this is during, while he's alive. And there were a lot more years to go still before Muawiyah radiallahu anhu passed away. But he nominated Yazid as his successor. Something, a lot of scholars, I personally disagree with. As I said, Sahaba, there's certain things you can disagree with. But I can't doubt Muawiyah radiallahu anhu's intention. As-Sahaba to put him adu, remember. He was a great man. There were a lot of, manaqib of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. Remember, Prophet ﷺ has made dua for him. There's a lot of, he is at a very high rank when it comes to Sahaba. But this is something we disagree with, or I disagree with. Some people might disagree with this. The reason they say he chose Yazid was one, so that there's no bloodshed, he had to nominate his successor. Two, there was Umayyads were in power, and if he had chose the Banu Hashim at that time, there would have been another fight. So while this is in power, everything is going peacefully, let's carry on. Third reason could be, Yazid did have potential. Yazid was, from a leader or a warrior perspective, he had potential. He was in one of the first armies. He was the leader of the army at a very tender age, like 20, 21 years old, when he attacked Constantinople, Istanbul of today. So he had that potential. He must have seen that potential in him. And always remember, it's not disallowed that if you have people who are more worthy of being an Amir, to have an Amir who's less worthy because of some other qualities. It's not disallowed. It's not, you wouldn't say Muawiyah radiallahu anhu was sinful in doing that. No, you cannot. But some of the Sahaba disagreed. So everyone agreed with Muawiyah radiallahu anhu's decision, but some of the Sahaba, including Hussein, remember, this happened, when Hassan radiallahu anhu passed away in Medina. When Hassan radiallahu anhu passed away, during this time he had resigned and then he was living under Muawiyah radiallahu anhu's khilafah. But then Hassan radiallahu anhu passed away, and that's when Muawiyah radiallahu anhu nominated Yazid, because otherwise he could have probably nominated Hassan radiallahu anhu. Wallahu a'lam. Now, some of the Sahaba disagreed. Out of them, Abdullah ibn Umar, ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, Abdullah ibn Zubair, Hussein bin Ali radiallahu anhum. Amongst the people who disagreed was some Sahaba who said, we don't like it, we disagree, but we'll carry on with our ibadah, with our sermons and giving teaching, ta'aleem, but we're not really, we won't wage a war against him, we won't rebel. But Hussein radiallahu anhu was very adamant. Again, you can't doubt Hussein radiallahu anhu's intention, because he probably did not deem Yazid to be fit enough to lead the Muslim Ummah, because he probably thought he would lead them to chaos, which eventually happened. But Wallahu alam, if certain things could be avoided, if that might not have happened. But Hussein radiallahu anhu had his reasons. So Hussein radiallahu anhu and Abdullah ibn Zubayr. Now these Sahaba, Abdullah ibn Abbas and Abdullah ibn Umar, they said, we don't like Yazid, we don't like him as the leader, but we'll accept him as the leader and carry on with our things. Sometimes we don't like the Tories, and we still under them. Just giving an example, some people might not like the party that are ruling, and don't ask me questions about his voting halal and all that. But I'm just giving you an example. So we might not like the Tories, but we still live under them. The rest of the people have chosen khair, and we do our jobs. This is how these Sahaba were. So to accuse them of being Yazid lovers is wrong. Is wrong. They looked at the bigger picture. They said, we don't want any more bloodshed, we don't want to be rebellious, we've already seen what's happened. Because these people, remember, had witnessed Siffin, had witnessed Jamal. Yazid had witnessed it. He did not know. Or Hussein radiallahu anhu was very young, but these people really had those, the wounds were really fresh. They did not want anything. And so they were very wise, they were making decisions with wisdom. So they did not go into the war or any sort of rebellion. Hussein radiallahu anhu was summoned by the governor of Medina, Munawwara, Waleed, and he summoned him and he asked him to come, and he was a very soft man. He was a nice, nice man, but he was Yazid's governor. And he said to him, I'm not just saying he's nice because he's got the same name as me, but he was a nice man. He was a nice man, and he said to Hussein radiallahu anhu that, just give him bay'ah and live your life. Give Yazid bay'ah. Now Hussein radiallahu anhu, when he felt this pressure, he came back to his house, and literally in a couple of hours, in a few hours, they packed up and they went to Makkah Mukarramah. Why they went to Makkah Mukarramah was because Abdullah ibn Zubair, who was already against Yazid and one of the greatest Sahabi, remember who Abdullah ibn Zubair was? He was the son of Zubair, who was Asma radiallahu anha's husband, and who was Asma, the daughter of Abu Bakr. So, see where it goes. So he is the grandson of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So Abdullah ibn Zubair already had some people who were his, group. He had a small group in Makkah al-Mukarramah. He had a bit of stronghold there, and the Umayyads did not have much control over Makkah al-Mukarramah. Now what has happened, Hussain radiallahu anhu, along with his family, comes to Makkah, and Abdullah ibn Zubair proposes that we use this as the launch pad, as the platform, and we spread, deen, and we sort of bring people back to what they considered haqq from Makkah. Let's use Makkah as a platform. In the time of Ali radiallahu anhu, now I'm taking you years, I'm throwing you from here to there, to here to there, so if you, as I said, if you don't understand anything, do ask me. We're going back now to Ali radiallahu anhu's time. Okay? In Ali radiallahu anhu's time, when he was propagating deen, he had made Kufa as his capital. And Hussain radiallahu anhu was with him in Kufa as a young boy. So Kufa was a stronghold, people loved Ahlul Bayt there, people loved Ali radiallahu anhu and his family. Again, there always was a saying of Kufi la yufi, that you can never trust the Kufans. And that's what happened with are you from Kufa? You're not from Kufa. So Kufans could not be trusted. But again, as I said, Ali radiallahu anhu has his share of his problems with them. But Hussain radiallahu anhu, while he's in Makkah al-Mukarramah, almost 50 to 60 envoys of people, messengers, came from Kufa. About 12,000 letters came from Kufa, calling Hussain radiallahu anhu to Kufa. No, you come here. We are here for you. We cannot live under the Umayyads. You are our leader. We choose you as our leader. You are our leader. And then those letters carry threats. We will not pray Jum'ah without you. We will not pray our Friday without you. Because in those days, the leader used to lead the Jum'ah. So Hussain radiallahu anhu looking at this, and again, you cannot doubt his intention. His intention was people there are under tyranny. They are not even ready to pray Jum'ah. People there are tyranny. If I have got a chance to save them, I will save them. He's saying, okay, no, Abdullah ibn Zubair, your Makkah advice is good, but I'm going to go to Kufa because of these letters. Abdullah ibn Zubair doesn't think it's a good idea. Ali radiallahu anhu's own brother, remember Hussain radiallahu anhu's own brother, remember Ali radiallahu anhu, he married again after Fatima al-Zahra radiallahu anha passed away. So Muhammad ibn al-Hanafi, I think this is the name, even he disagreed with Hussain radiallahu anhu. Hussain radiallahu anhu's own brother. Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he told, they were the top, Jalil al-Qadr Sahaba, as they call them, the top-notch Sahaba who lived at that time. And they said to Ali radiallahu anhu, to Hussain radiallahu anhu, it's not a good idea. Al-Kufi la yufi. You can't trust them. Remember, then they reminded him, remember what they did with your father. Remember, you cannot do this. And they kept on, begging him, literally begging him. Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu he's in Medina. When they set off to go to Kufa, he leaves Medina, and remember, traveling wasn't as easy as traveling today. Traveled for days to come to Hussain radiallahu anhu to tell him not to go to Kufa. And he reminded him of a hadith. He said to him, in fact, he told him, this is a hadith that I haven't told anyone before. And the hadith was, in the last moments of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given a choice by Jibreel alayhi salam, that whether you choose dunya or akhirah. And he chose akhirah. Whether you choose the world or the hereafter. You know, you could live more if you want. But Prophet ﷺ chose akhirah. What he was really insinuating there, Abdullah ibn Umar, was the fact that Rasulullah ﷺ, your grandfather, has chose akhirah. Your grandfather and you are part of him. Ali radiallahu, Prophet ﷺ said regarding Hussein, that Hussein is from me and I'm from Hussein. Here you are apart. So if you are going for some, obviously he was not going for dunya, as I explained, the reasons were good. The reasoning was good, but you would still, in order to, do that good, you would have to go on, you'll get a status, a dunyawi status, a worldly status, which is to be a leader. You will not get it. Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu was insinuating that your grandfather has asked for the akhirah. So anything of this dunya, you will not get. This is what he's insinuating. Hussein radiallahu anhu was adamant. He goes, look at these letters. 12,000. These big 2 bags. You know those big gunny bags that you get? Those big rice bags. Like them. 2 big bags of letters. Look at these letters. These people, if I leave them, who have they got? So Hussein radiallahu anhu, before this I forgot one of the main points, which was Hussein radiallahu anhu, after he got the letters, he sent the messenger, who was his cousin, Muslim ibn Aqil. Muslim ibn Aqil was son of Aqil. Aqil was one of the brothers of Ali radiallahu anhu. So the uncle of Hussein radiallahu anhu was Aqil, and his son was Muslim. Muslim ibn Aqil was sent as a messenger to go to Kufa and see what's happening. See if it's good to go there. When Muslim ibn Aqil arrived in Kufa, about 12,000 people, each representing a big family, came to Muslim ibn Aqil and gave him bay'ah for Hussein. So roughly, the scholars write 40 to 50,000 people gave bay'ah to Muslim ibn Aqil, saying, we want Hussein, Hussein is our leader, etc., etc. They kept on saying, and Muslim ibn Aqil, seeing this support, he sent a letter to Hussein radiallahu anhu saying, Hussein, you need to come. You need to come because there's overwhelming support here, and we can really spread haqq from here. This was Muslim ibn Aqil's letter. And then things, keep Muslim ibn Aqil there in Kufa at the moment, yeah? When I'm coming, when Hussein radiallahu anhu, he got this letter on the 8th of Dhul Hijjah. On the 8th of Dhul Hijjah. And things changed overnight. Literally overnight. I'll explain how. But Abdullah ibn Umar, he's trying to tell Hussein radiallahu anhu not to go. He's begging him not to go. And eventually when he's about to go, Abdullah ibn Umar says, can you just tell me that place where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam used to kiss you? I want to kiss you in that place. SubhanAllah. So Hussein radiallahu anhu lifted his gun and he kissed Hussein radiallahu anhu where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam used to kiss him. So obviously he was the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam who he dearly loved. And something we have to keep in mind. Things changed there because Nu'man ibn Bashir was the governor of Kufa. And Ibn Bashir was kind of, again, a kind of soft person. All these rumors of Muslim ibn Aqil, 40,000 people giving bay'ah to Muslim ibn Aqil, they reached Yazid. Yazid sent the most wretched person, a tyrant, one of the most ruthless man in that era, Hitler of that era, Ibn Ziyad. Ibn Ziyad came to Kufa, was sent to Kufa to stop this uprising, because he was known as a political leader. He was ruthless. We're all against Hitler, what he has done. He was bad, but no one can doubt the fact that Hitler, as a leader, he used to make things happen. Similarly, this person was ruthless, but as a leader, he would make things happen. So what he did was, this is happening. Again, I've sort of fast forwarded Hussein radiallahu anhu's departure from Mecca. This has still not happened really. But It only happened once the letter of Muslim ibn Aqil on the 8th of Hijrah, remember. In this time, when he got the letter, he sent off the Sahaba. I'm trying to put things into perspective. So Sahaba are begging Hussein radiallahu anhu not to go. In this time, what's happened? Ibn Ziyad has come to, has come to Kufa. And when he came to Kufa, he was a very, very clever and cunning person. He came, he had hid his face, and he came with 17 people with him. 17 people, and he was the 18th. He came, his face covered. He came in the morning, early morning. And when people of Kufa seen him, they thought Hussein radiallahu anhu has come. So they started chanting and, praising Hussein radiallahu anhu, praising Ahlul Bayt and saying Assalamu alaikum and Assalamu alayka, Ya ibn Rasulullah. They started praising him and chanting. And when they kept on chanting and chanting and chanting, one of the soldiers of Ibn Ziyad said to him, "Shut up, this is not Hussein, this is Ibn Ziyad." When they came, because everyone had heard about Ibn Ziyad, they thought, this is trouble. Everyone, hid in their places, and all these meetings with Muslim ibn Aqil, they were done underground. Now, he took over power in the governor's house, Muslim Ibn Ziyad, and he removed Nu'man ibn Bashir from his position, and he said, "I'm the new governor of Kufa." I'm the new governor of Kufa, and what he does is, he is very, very clever. He sends a man, because he thought, if I ask people in this big city, they're not going to tell me where Muslim ibn Aqil is. And in order to crush this uprising, I need to crush Muslim ibn Aqil. So what he did was, a big bag of gold coins, he took them, he sent a man who seen a traveler, and he said, "I am from the Shia of Ali, but from Syria, from Damascus." So this man, they were supporters of Ali radiallahu anhu there as well. So I'm the supporter of Ahlul Bayt, but from Damascus, and he looked like a traveler, and he had this bag full of gold coins. So every person he went to, he said, "I need to give this to Muslim ibn Aqil." Now the host of Muslim ibn Aqil was Hani, rahimahullah. Hani, he said, "You cannot go to Muslim ibn Aqil." People sent him to Hani. Hani said, "You can't go to Muslim ibn Aqil, give me the money." So he took the money off him, but what they came to know is Hani is the host. And Hani, no one knew that he was with the Shia of Ali, or with the supporters of Hussein radiallahu anhu. Everyone thought he was happy under the Umayyad, and he was from the elite of Kufa. So Ibn Ziyad came to know who the host is. Ibn Ziyad calls Hani, summons Hani, and tells him, "Tell me where Muslim ibn Aqil is." He goes, "What are you on about? I don't know. Why are you asking me for?" Then he brings that spy who gave him the gold coins, and Hani came to know this was a plot, and we have got trapped. Then he arrests Hani, and he actually hits Hani, and he I think injures him, and he was bleeding profusely. When people came to know Hani, because he was from the elite, all the tribes, they came. They said, "We need Hani, otherwise all our tribes are going to come, and we're going to launch an attack on the governor's house." Ibn Ziyad, he was very shrewd. He got all the leaders together, and he calmed them down. He goes, "I'll never do anything to Hani, but you need to give me Muslim ibn Aqil, otherwise I'll bring forces from Syria." Now these people are in a dilemma now. What do we do? Muslim ibn Aqil came to know this is happening. Remember, Hussein radiallahu anhu is already on his way. He's coming towards Kufa at this time, and this is what's happening in Kufa. Muslim ibn Aqil came to know about the plot, and Muslim ibn Aqil summons everyone, all the supporters, to come out, and we need to get Hani out of the governor's house. Basically, we need to fight. Remember, how many people gave the pledge? 12,000 people, and with those 12,000 people, there were a lot of people with them. So altogether, 40,000-50,000 people. When the time came to fight, the Kufans showed their colors. From those 40 to 50,000 people, 4,000 people came to support Muslim ibn Aqil. This is in the morning. This is how quickly things are happening. Things are happening very quickly now. I know you guys are probably tired. What time? How much time have we got?
If you're trying to cut out about 15 minutes.
Okay, that's fine.
The main bit of it now, so.
Sorry?
It's like getting to the main bit.
Yes, but are you guys awake or are you guys asleep? If you guys are awake, then I'll carry on.
Yes.
Yeah? Even if you're not awake, I'll still carry on. Yeah. So Muslim ibn Aqil, he comes and in the morning he's got 4,000 people with him. Ibn Ziyad, he's thinking, the people are outside, what do I do? Ibn Ziyad is very, very shrewd. Again, he gets the leaders, and what he uses this time is bribery. He bribes the leaders, he promises them all the statuses, you'll be this governor of this, and you'll be the head leader of this place, and you'll get this much bribery. He also asked the mothers and fathers of these people to call them in, otherwise I'm going to call forces from Syria. How many people were with Ibn Ziyad? 17. So Ibn Ziyad was just it was just mere lip service. By the time he called the Syrian army from Yazid, by the time he did all that, these people could have finished it. But it was just the threats that so it was just the threats that Ibn Ziyad was using. And they were only 17, 18 people. So in the morning, they had 4,000 people with Muslim ibn Aqil. Come the afternoon, 4,000 people became 400. They were leaving literally in rows. Come the evening or Maghrib time, 400 became 40 people. When he prayed Salah, Maghrib Salah, and he turned around to Ibn Aqil, these 40 people had become 10 people. When he seen 10 people, he said, how am I going to fight with 10 people? So they retreat. And while in the cover of darkness, while he's walking to go towards Kinda. Kinda is a locality that was hosting him. When he looks back, those 10 people have also disappeared. So, he was alone. Muslim ibn Aqil, from Ahlul Bayt, from the family of Prophet ﷺ. Remember who he is. He's not any Tom, Dick or Harry. He's Muslim ibn Aqil, from the family of Prophet ﷺ, the son of Aqil, the cousin of Hussain radiallahu anhu. This man was betrayed. He had no food, nothing on him. He goes begging for something, begging for shelter. No one is giving him shelter. One door to another door to another door, no one is giving him shelter. Then he knocks at a door and an old lady comes out and he begs for some water. The water is given, he drinks water, he still stood there. The old lady said, what do you want? He said, I'm Muslim ibn Aqil. She says, from the family of Prophet ﷺ. He says, yes. And this was happening. He said, yes, come, don't worry, I'll hide you. I'll give you shelter. Muslim ibn Aqil is being given shelter by this old woman. The old woman's son comes, and the son is told not to tell Ibn Ziyad about his whereabouts, otherwise he'll kill him. The son is again interested in money. The son gets a bribe from Ibn Ziyad, and he tells him where Muslim ibn Aqil is. Ibn Ziyad sends Abdullah ibn Ash'ath. He sends him, he sends this man to get Muslim ibn Aqil. Muslim ibn Aqil obviously tries to fight, but there was a full army there looking for him. Muslim ibn Aqil, they also threatened to burn the house. So he says, I don't want any harm to be caused to these people. So he goes to Ibn Ziyad. But before he goes to Ibn Ziyad, tells Abdullah ibn Ash'af that please give my message to Hussein radiallahu anhu, tell him to go back. These people have betrayed us. Our Shia have betrayed us. So Abdullah ibn Ash'af sends this message, even though he was against him. If we give him some credit, to his credit, he sends this message to Hussein radiallahu anhu. Muslim ibn Aqil is called and he is thrown from the top of the government house. Hani, the person who hosted him, he was in the middle of the street, he was killed. And to throw this sort of terror into people, not to go against the Umayyads. Muslim ibn Aqil is thrown. Remember, this Muslim ibn Aqil from the family of Prophet ﷺ is flung from the top of the building to humiliate him. And he is told, and the last things he says before, reading his kalima is, our Shia have deceived us. These were his last words. And then he's killed. In the meantime, Hussein radiallahu anhu is, on his way. And Hussein radiallahu anhu, while he's on his way, he sends a messenger to, this is, time has passed, people are waiting, Ibn Ziyad is waiting for Hussein radiallahu anhu. Time has passed while he's on his journey. And Hussein radiallahu anhu sends a messenger to see if everything is okay in Kufa. This messenger is taken and executed. Second messenger that comes, he is also executed, again in the similar, flung from the top of the building. But before he's flung, he says to the crowd that will gather that Hussein is on his way, he's very close. And he came to know, people came to know Hussein. So Ibn Ziyad, fearing that there will be another, support for Hussein, I need to call reinforcements. So he calls reinforcements. And there was an army going towards Turkey, headed by Abdullah ibn Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu anhu's son, Amr or Umar ibn Abi Waqqas. And this person was the leader of this small convoy, small army that was going towards Turkey. They were intercepted, calling for reinforcements against Hussein radiallahu anhu. Now Hussein radiallahu anhu was approaching Kufa. Army is approaching from one side, and Ibn Ziyad is waiting in Kufa, and they meet in Karbala. So the army that was against Hussein radiallahu anhu and Hussein radiallahu anhu's convoy, which was consistent of about 100 people, including women and children, they met in Karbala. So this army then surrounded, and Kufa to Karbala is not, it's not a big distance. So Hussein radiallahu anhu almost made it to Kufa, but they wanted to stop Hussein radiallahu anhu before Kufa in case people change again. Now comes the moment when Hussein radiallahu anhu is surrounded by these people. He was deprived of water. The siege took, there was a river close by, but they were not allowed to go into these rivers. People, non-Muslims were drinking from it. Everyone else was drinking from it. Animals were drinking from it. But Ahlul Bayt, the family of Prophet ﷺ, were deprived from it by this army. The army general, which was Umar ibn Abi Waqqas, son of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, which was a great Sahabi, but this was his son, he was a bit reluctant attacking or reluctant being forceful with Hussein radiallahu anhu because he was from the family of Prophet ﷺ. He did not want to do it. But obviously, he was also a loyal soldier. Hussein radiallahu anhu there are some negotiations with them. What do you want to do? Why don't you go back? He said, these people have called me. These people have called me. Look at these letters. These people, they don't like Umayyads. This is tyranny. 12,000 letters. What happened there when Hussein radiallahu anhu showed, I'm really flying through this right now. There was a 6 to 7 day siege. And in this, all this happened. Umar ibn Abi Waqqas Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas' son, he put forward a proposal to Hussein radiallahu anhu. And Hussein radiallahu anhu said, okay, I agree. If these people have gone against me, these 12,000 letters, if they've gone against me, then what you do is either send me to the borders and I'll fight for the Muslims, or let me speak to Yazid directly, because some scholars have said he was more comfortable dealing with Yazid than with Ibn Ziyad, because Ibn Ziyad was a ruthless tyrant. Or let me go back to Makkah Mukarramah. This is the proposal of Hussein radiallahu anhu. Made complete sense. It was fine. Two things happened there. One is, in this time, Ibn Ziyad thought Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas' son Umar is being a bit lenient. So he called another ruthless man whose name was Shimmer was his name. Another ruthless tyrant who would kill for no reason, rash and very, very ruthless. So he called Shimmer to also not only keep an eye on Umar ibn Abi Waqqas, but also be ruthless with Hussein radiallahu anhu and Ahlul Bayt. Now, Hussein radiallahu anhu gave this proposal, and Shimmer was going to and fro to Kufa to meet Ibn Ziyad. When this proposal came to Ibn Ziyad, for a moment, they thought, okay. But Shimmer, he forced him, he said, no, if you listen to this, then you're lost. So you have to tell him to give bay'ah to you for Yazid. This is your victory. So Hussein radiallahu anhu was sent this message from Ibn Ziyad. Hussein radiallahu anhu at that time said, if I had given this proposal even to non-Muslims, they would have accepted. And you are not accepting this from Hussein, who is son of Ali, and Fatima, who is the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to play with and used to keep him on his shoulders. He's the same Hussein who Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw playing in the streets, and he would run after him. He would run after him, playing with him, then he would catch him, hug him, bless him, and kiss him. He's the same Hussein. He's the same Hussein who Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to kiss. Who is the same Hussein who Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam named him and his brother as Sayyida Shababi Ahl al-Jannah. These are the leaders of the youth of Jannah. He's the same Hussein. Are you depriving me? Are you, behaving with me in this manner? When some of the soldiers, when they heard this, they went on Hussein radiallahu anhu's side. They said, and amongst them was Hurra bin Yazid, one of the sort of deputy leaders, and some of the people went on Hussein radiallahu anhu's side. And also, when Hussein radiallahu anhu showed those bags of letters, people who had called him got scared. They said, if Hussein is sent to Yazid, he'll give all our names and we're in trouble. Remember, these are the same people from the Shia of Ali or Shia of Hussein who called Hussein radiallahu anhu, and now they are worried. They would rather that Hussein radiallahu anhu die than him going to Yazid or him remaining alive, because they think they're in trouble. So, being self-centered again. So, on the 9th of Muharram, Hussein radiallahu anhu takes a nap. He sees a dream. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes in his dream and said, Hussein, it's time to come to me. There was also a dream in Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time. There was a time in Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's era. There came a moment when Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in Salama radiallahu anha's house, and he was having this one-to-one with the angel who informed him. And no, he asked Salama to shut the door and don't allow anyone to come. But Hussein radiallahu anhu was young, so he jumped inside. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam hugged Hussein and he started crying because the angel had just informed him that this grandson of yours will be killed by your own ummah, by your own nation. And the angel even showed him the soil of Karbala. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had the soil of Karbala in his hands. And he says, رِيحٌ فِيهَا رِيحٌ كَرْبٌ وَبَلَاءٌ. I can smell that this is Karb and Bala. This is, Karb means a calamity, and Bala, a problematic. This place is very problematic. And this soil was actually with Salama radiallahu anha. So, this has been prophesied in the time of Prophet ﷺ. And then Hussein radiallahu anhu sees this dream. He tells them, give me 1 day. Give me 1 day and I will, I'll come back to you, to the army. And there's all these, the ruthless people, as I mentioned. Again, I forgot his name. Shimmer, he is there, and Ibn Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas' son Umar is there. So these people are all waiting, and they are ready to pounce. Hussein radiallahu anhu decides, and the reason they say he took 1 day was so that he makes ibadah, he repents for whatever he has done. Hussein radiallahu anhu, for his previous, he repents and he prays to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before he knew he was about to be, martyred. Next day, Hussein radiallahu anhu, in this time also, Hussein radiallahu anhu asked people from Ahlul Bayt, you can go. They only want 1 man here, that's me. If you want, you can go. But they refused. They said, how can we go? How can we leave you? What is life after you, Hussein? Muslim ibn Aqil's son says, we have to also avenge the death of our father. They had come to know now. Muslim ibn Aqil was killed. So, on the 10th of Muharram, they started the battle. They came out to fight. 20-30 of these people, 70 in fact according to our narration, 70 people came to fight against thousands of armed. And they're saying 70 people were really advancing and killing these thousands, and they got scared. So all of them, they had to arrange reinforcements because they were being so strong. Only 70 against thousands. And they were killing, but slowly, one by one, the Ahlul Bayt were martyred. They were all protecting the core Ahlul Bayt, which was Hussein radiallahu anhu and his sons, Hassan radiallahu anhu's sons. All these were there. The only person who did not come out to fight was known as Zayn al-Abidin, because he was not well and he was with the women, he had fever. He could not come out and fight. They say in his lifetime he used to cry every day why I couldn't fight that day. He used to cry every day. He was a great leader in his time. And then Hussein radiallahu anhu, his son got killed. Remember, this is a man who hadn't tasted water, who hadn't had a sip of water since 3 days, deprived of water. Since 3 days there was no water in his body. He's still fighting. They say he was a Kufan man from the army. He says, I've never seen anyone fight so bravely like Hussein fought that day. Radiallahu anhu. Hussein radiallahu anhu, he retreats for a bit. It was him alone, him and Abbas, who were left. Abbas is killed, and only Hussein radiallahu anhu, he's there. Hussein radiallahu anhu goes in his tent, and he has a young baby called Abdullah. He kisses him because he knew his time was up. And an arrow came right into the neck of this baby, and this baby died as well. Hussein radiallahu anhu puts him on the floor and raises his hand. Oh Allah, give us patience on your decree. These are his dua. SubhanAllah. These are lessons. Remember, anything that you learn from Karbala is not that you have to mourn and you have to cut your clothes and you have to, kill yourself. No, these are the lessons we have to learn. Standing up for truth and justice. Even in such, calamities falling on you. Who is Hussein radiallahu anhu remembering? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Saying, give us patience on your decree. That we don't become from those who question your decree. Give us patience upon your decree. And then, because he's deprived of water, he is going to drink water from that nearby river. And as he's going, remember, there were people who were reluctant fighting him from the army, because it was the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But Shimr was ruthless. And some of the people around him, they were ruthless. So when he was going for water, they shot an arrow in his back. And when he went down, he said, I want to drink some water. I want water. So Hussein radiallahu anhu, again he reminded them who Hussein was. It had such an effect, the way he was saying it, that the army backed up. They couldn't, they didn't have the audacity to attack him. Shimr came with Anas ibn Sinan, one of his, partners, or one of his, his own men. And they started attacking Hussein radiallahu anhu, and they stabbed him 60 times. Brothers and sisters, this is Hussein radiallahu anhu. Remember, this is the grandson of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Remember everything. Remember who he was. Remember he was, when someone says in Arabic that I am from him and he's from me, that shows the extreme love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had for Hussein radiallahu anhu. SubhanAllah. Grandson of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A man who gave his all to this ummah to bring them towards the right path. Sacrificed everything, this family sacrificed everything of theirs to bring us on haqq. And what did these people do? They killed the grandson of this man, of Prophet ﷺ. 60 times. And they were not, their thirst of blood wasn't quenched there. Shimr takes the head of Hussein radiallahu anhu, and Anas takes this head off the body of Hussein radiallahu anhu, grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they take this head of Hussein radiallahu anhu, they take it, and what is happening in Medina is Salama radiallahu anha, she sees a dream of some other Sahabi, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with dust on his beard in a dream, dust on his clothes, comes to this Sahabi and says, I've just witnessed the Shahada. With the glass full of blood, I've just witnessed the Shahada of my grandson. My own ummah has killed my grandson. Allahu Akbar. Hussein radiallahu anhu, his blessed head is taken on a plate to Ibn Ziyad. And while it's being taken, Zainab, the women and the children were taken from the tents, and they were taken to Ibn Ziyad. And one thing, they did not do anything with the women. So it wasn't, they had that much respect that they did not do anything with the women and children. But when this head was taken of Hussein radiallahu anhu to Ibn Ziyad, his sister Zainab radiallahu anha, she read a couplet. She said, Ya Muhammada, Ya Muhammada, Salla alayka al-mala'ikat as-sama. That she reminded herself and people, and probably her coping mechanism, she reminded who the grandfather was. Oh Muhammad, may salutations be upon you from the angels of the sky. هذا الحسين بالأراء. This is Hussein. Hussein radiallahu anhu's body was there. This is Hussein who was lying in the battlefield. مزمن بالثمار قطع الأعضاء. Because they did not only cut off his head, blessed head, they also cut off his limbs. This is Hussein lying, and he's full of blood, he's covered in blood, and he has lost his limb, and they've cut his limb. Ya Muhammada, inna banatika sabaya. O Prophet of Allah, your daughters, as in me, are being taken as slaves, as prisoners. And your progeny has been killed. When she's reading this, the soldiers from the Kufans, who had called Hussein radiallahu anhu, and now had supported in the massacre of Ahlul Bayt, started crying. They could not control themselves when they heard this. And Zainab radiallahu anha, this is one thing very, very important, remember this. Zainab radiallahu anha at that time made a dua. She made a dua, she said, these are the people who called us, and these are the people who killed us, and now they are crying. May Allah make them cry until the day of Qiyamah. This is my own view. If you cry and you tear your clothes like those soldiers were doing at that time, you come under the dua or the dua of Zainab radiallahu anha. Remember what the dua she made. So rather than, mourning and crying, take lessons from this story. It's a sad day, no one can deny this. One of the saddest days in the history of Islam. The grandson of our Prophet, was killed. Massacred. The family was massacred. One of the most, one of the darkest chapters of our history. No doubt. But then the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam come above or take precedence over our emotion. Because we have to mourn in the way Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has asked us to mourn. We cannot mourn 1400 years later. We are sad, but we take lessons from this story. How Hussein radiallahu anhu, he was not a coward. He did not go to Ibn Ziyad, leave me alone, I will give bay'ah to you. No, he stood for truth and justice. He stood for it. Even if it meant he was going to be killed, he still stood for it. This is what we have to take from this. How Hussein radiallahu, how his family supported him. How we should support our families, how our families should support us, how we should stick up, how we should stand up for truth. These are the lessons we have to take. Then Hussein radiallahu anhu's blessed head was taken to this Ibn Ziyad, the tyrant, and he, with a stick, started playing with his head, with his lips. At that time, Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu stood up. He was a Sahabi, a great Sahabi. We've got a lot of narrations from him. He was in Kufa and he was a witness to this. And when he seen this, he said, "Stop there, because I have seen the blessed lips of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam kissing those lips. Do not desecrate it. Do not humiliate it. Do not, disrespect it." And they say Ibn Ziyad, something overcame him at that time. He got so scared. And then it was taken to Yazid, who sent it to Medina. Now, there's a difference of opinion. They say Hussein radiallahu anhu's blessed head was carried to Medina Munawwara and it was buried along with Hassan radiallahu anhu's grave, or Fatima radiallahu anha's grave, and Hussein radiallahu anhu's body is buried in Karbala, even now. And they say some travelers who went past that place had smelled this beautiful fragrance from the grave of Hussein radiallahu anhu. When they went past it, they smelled this beautiful fragrance. Now the question arises, and let me tell you something. Few years later, a group came about from these same people who had deceived and betrayed Hussein radiallahu anhu, At-Tawwabun. At-Tawwabun are those people who said, we will, whatever mistakes we made, we're going to sort them out now. So we will fight until we kill the Umayyads, those people who were involved in Hussein radiallahu anhu's massacre. And they went to Karbala, to the grave, they started crying and they started beating themselves up, and that's where this practice started. But what had happened eventually was that each one of them had a horrific death. Shimr, the person who killed Hussain radiallahu anhu, was actually, he was killed and his body was dragged by dogs. They all had a, kama tudinu tudan, whatever goes round comes round. Ibn Ziyad, remember Ibn Ziyad was a guy who only wanted status. He just wanted high rank. That's all he wanted. He wasn't interested in anything else. The time he was made the governor of Kufa, he was just 28. So he was a young man, arrogant man. All he wanted is status. But Mukhtar was another leader who came about, and he avenged the death of Hussain radiallahu anhu, and he killed Ibn Ziyad. And what had happened was his head was put on a plate and brought to Mukhtar. So the same thing happened to Ibn Ziyad. What I'm trying to say is each one of them had a very, very ruthless and a horrific and humiliating death because of what they had done. Ibn Ziyad, they say, when his head came to Mukhtar, the Sahaba, in fact, Imam Tirmidhi mentions this in his book, that a snake came from nowhere and went into his head and stayed there for a bit and then came out. Went again, stayed there for a bit, came out. Went again, stayed there for a bit and came out. So they all had very, very horrific deaths, whoever did this to them, Ahlul Bayt. And when I refer to Ahlul Bayt, I mean Ahlul Bayt are the family of Prophet ﷺ, Fatima, Ali radiallahu anhuma, Hassan, Hussain radiallahu anhuma. We look at Ahlul Bayt from Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we look at the broader perspective of Abbas radiallahu anhu, Ja'far radiallahu, all their families as well as the wives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All the wives are from Ahlul Bayt. People disagree. Some people say no. Some sects, they say no, these are not from Ahlul Bayt. I tell them, if I was to tell you that your mother is not from your family, how would you feel? How would you feel? If your own mother, your mother is not classified as part of your family, it's wrong. Anyone would say it's wrong. So, the azwaj, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to the wives of Prophet ﷺ, calls them the wives of Prophet ﷺ in the Quran. So how can we deny them the status of Ahlul Bayt? So they were all Ahlul Bayt. And Ahlul Bayt, what we consider Ahlul Bayt, and what we have to respect them, we have to love them because they're from the family of Prophet ﷺ, as long as they're righteous. Remember the hadith of Prophet ﷺ, that he who is, put back by his deeds cannot be put forward by his blood. Meaning that your family, just because you're from a certain family, doesn't mean you're automatically, righteous. Your a'mal have to be righteous, you have to be considered righteous. Then if you're also Ahlul Bayt, it's nurun ala nur, then, it's even better. And then if you're from the time of Sahaba, subhanAllah, what can you say? You're from the best family. No doubt about it. And one of the things that we do with Ahlul Bayt, we don't give them charity. You can't give them charity as a form of respect. You give them hadiyah, but you can't give them charity. So these are the Ahlul Bayt. Now the question, in fact I'll leave it to the question and answer. If you don't ask me this question, then I'll answer it myself. So this was, as I said, one of the darkest chapters in the history of Islam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the ability to act upon the Quran and Sunnah, as well as take lessons from these stories, rather than bring about practices which are not Islamic. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept this from us, accept this from me and from all of you. If you have any questions, please do ask. I'm sure you have loads.
I have a question about Yazid's participation in Constantinople. I heard he didn't want to go initially, but later he was forced by his father.
Yazid was appointed the leader of Constantinople, the convoy or the army to attack Constantinople. They were not successful, remember. They came back without success. And I don't know whether you know, but in that army was also Hussein radiallahu anhu. So Hussein and Yazid, Hussein radiallahu anhu and Yazid, they fought in the same army. I have no idea whether he wanted to go or he didn't, but he was definitely part of that. That's one positive that we find in Yazid's, life, which was he went to fight in the path of Allah when attacking Constantinople. Rest of them all negatives. Any more questions? Yes?
Was Yazid not a just ruler?
Yazid, there were reports, and this is, they say, one of the reasons why Hussein radiallahu anhu did not want Yazid to be the leader was because his character was a bit dodgy. So he was not a just ruler, as well as he had some other, things that he did which were not, which a Muslim leader, a Khalifa shouldn't do. So there are reports that he was not a just ruler. Also there are reports that he was a just ruler. So we get both narrations. But the crime that Yazid committed, and I'll come to that, that was the question I was looking for. The crime there outweighs whether he was a just ruler or not. So that crime sort of, comes forward. Whether he was a just ruler or not, it doesn't matter. That crime that he committed was so big that even if he was a just ruler, it kind of outshines that in a bad way, in a negative way. So, yes?
So we could say that Yazid was a violent leader, wasn't he?
There are not any direct reports of his tyranny apart from what he did. But if you take this into consideration, then there can't be any worse form of tyranny than, massacring someone and someone's whole family. And that also the family of Prophet ﷺ, just so that you stay the leader. So in that sense, yes. But other reports, as the sister asked, there are both sides. In normal circumstances, whether he was a tyrant or not.
Some of our Shia brothers and sisters say that it's allowed to curse him. Would you agree with that, or what would you comment on?
I'll give you a quote from Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah. He was asked the same question by his son, and he was asked, do we like Yazid? He said, any Muslim in his senses will not like Yazid. Do we curse him? Do we send la'na upon him? Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal said, the way we are taught by Rasulullah is not to name and give someone la'na, but to generally, la'natullahi ala zalimeen. That's what we would say. This is, even in Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, there are three views. One view is that Yazid should be cursed and he's a kafir. Extreme view. One view is that he should not be. One view is completely on the other extreme, that he should not be. He's not kafir. In fact, he was a good man, and they are like, this is another extreme. But the most sort of the consensus of scholars is on the opinion, which is the most moderate one, is that you will not say he's a kafir or he's not a kafir. You kind of remain silent on that, and you will not curse him directly. Generally you can curse, but not directly. At the same time, you will not praise him. Because from my small, humble opinion, you cannot completely take off Yazid from the blame. People can say, at that time, Yazid did not himself physically do it. Ibn Ziyad was the culprit. What I agree with is, Ibn Ziyad is not, there's not much mention of Ibn Ziyad. Whenever we speak, it's all about Yazid. But Ibn Ziyad was one of the biggest culprits. And bigger culprits than them were the Kufans, who called him Sayyidina Hussain. So, Ibn Ziyad was definitely, he gets a big share of the wrong. But Yazid is the one who put Ibn Ziyad there. So he cannot be completely taken off the blame. So we'll mention sukut. As in, he's no la'na upon him directly, but generally you could say, if he has done those, then la'na upon him. La'natullahi ala zalimeen.
Assalamu alaikum. I remember when I searched for a book on Karbala, I found it very difficult. And I think one issue is that Muslims are sort of try to avoid this calamity, even though you have, like you say, you have very good learning points from this event. But we tend to avoid it. This Karbala is sensitive, just forget about that. And I remember I was searching for information, and I only found one book on Karbala and talk about that. And so I think, in my opinion, first we tend to run away from that issue. That's number one. Number two, in terms of resources, do you have any refutable? Because
yes.
We've got side A and side B, any refutable resources on that?
Very good question. I agree. There's a lot of escapism, or kind of shying away from this topic, which is wrong. It should be mentioned, but also in the right light, it should be mentioned, and the lessons that are taken from it should be propagated. And also a lesson that we should not do something like this again, so that people learn that. So they should be mentioned. Some people say, if you're from Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, if you speak about too much about Karbala and Yazid and all these things, Hussain radiallahu anhu, Ahlul Bayt, you might be called a Shia. And probably the vice versa. That's also a reason. But that shouldn't be the reason. It's wrong. It's really, really wrong. So I agree with you. And if you talk about reputable books, I know Arabic books. I don't know in English if there are. There might be. The history of Tabari. Tabari is a book. It's all on history. Ibn Kathir has written history on it. You must have heard of Ibn Kathir. Ibn Hajar has also written a lot of things on it. And a lot of the times they are sort of in separate places. So Imam Tirmidhi has written some narrations about it. So you have sort of research. But there are, in Tabari and Ibn Hajar, Ibn Kathir, it's explained in detail. So these are good. There's also a book you get, it's called Maqtal Hussain, I think. That was written by someone in the second century Hijri, 120 Hijri or something. And it was written from a perspective of the Shia of Kufa. By that time, it had turned into a theological Shiaism. In that, you get some things which have got no background. For example, I told you the siege was for 6 to 7 days. They mentioned the siege was 40 days. And they somehow propagated Yazid's direct involvement, which is not possible because of the time scale. By the time Ibn Ziyad goes to Yazid and Yazid comes back from Damascus, it wasn't possible. It doesn't make sense. So that book you have to be careful about. But there are, Ibn Kathir and Jalaluddin Tabari's book. That's very useful.
Thank you.
Yes.
After the martyrdom of Imam Hussain, Yazid went on to attack, not in South, but he sent his army to attack Medina and Mecca. What was the reason for this?
One of the things Jazakallah for reminding me, one of the other reasons why Yazid can't be completely taken off the blame is because when Yazid came to know what they had done, what Ibn Ziyad and his army had done, he did not punish them. So he did say, I did not ask you to do this. This is not what I asked. I just want the Kufans on my side. But he did not punish Ibn Ziyad. There was no court martial. There was nothing of that sort. He did not punish the other person. He did not punish anyone. So this is something that again goes against Yazid being a good guy. Then he went to Mecca and Medina because again Abdullah ibn Zubayr was against him. So he, again was involved in the process of killing Abdullah ibn Zubayr. So it was again to that control freak.
Is it as brutal as they say? A lot of people say women were raped.
There are reports, but nothing confirmed. From what we understand from Hussain radiallahu anhu, it wasn't probably because it was Ahlul Bayt, wallahu alam. But this is a man who did not even care about the sanctity of Makkah, Mukarramah. So, if, like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, when your haya goes, then فَاصْنَعْ مَا شِئْتَ, then you do whatever you like. So, it is possible.
Regarding when Hazrat Zainab cursed the Kufans, I heard during that time they began to beat themselves up as well, and then she said...
No, they were beating up themselves, but it kind of didn't follow as a religious custom after that. It started when the Tawaboon came and they sat on the grave of Hussain and then started beating themselves.
And did Muqdad later claim he was a prophet? I heard he became a munafiq in a way. Muqdad like, claimed to be a prophet. So,
no, Allah, I have no idea. Probably. It's all historic things, so there's no...
I heard Abdullah Zubayr attacked him because of his claims later.
There have been a lot of false prophets, he might be one of them, but I don't know. Allah.
What about some Shiites have, they say that the love for Hassan is greater than the love that you have for Hussein, because...
Hassan and Hussein, good question, very good question. If you look at the manaqib or the narrations that we get, definitely Hassan anhu's narrations are more in terms of his status and his traits and how good he was. But Rasulullah called them both as the leaders of the youth of Jannah, which kind of gives them that equal status in that sense. Also, Hussein anhu was made shaheed, so if there was anything to catch up to, they would have caught up to him, definitely. So, personally, obviously I told you about the hadith where this, in terms of their character, yes, Hassan anhu was older, he was more mature, not that old, he was just a year older, not even a year older. He was older, he was wiser, and he was not as rash. Yusuf alayhi salam. Hussein anhu was more sort of rash in his decisions. But again, as I said, they've got the ultimate status, which kind of really can't choose between them. And then the shahada of Hussein anhu. What can we say? So we can't really, it's hard to choose between them. But yes, the manaqib, if you look at the narrations, yes, definitely Hassan anhu are more. Any more questions? Sisters are a bit quiet. No more questions? You're not quiet between yourselves, quiet not asking. Any questions? Shall we just end it there?
Yeah.
Last thing can I mention? It won't take long. The Kufans, you know what? The later on Kufan scholars, I love them because I've read them and they were amazing scholars. But that era of Kufans were a dodgy one, very, very dodgy. Because these people, they didn't learn from their mistake. Because then what happened, years later, they did the same thing again with Ahlul Bayt. Zayd, rahimahullah, again was killed in a similar manner. Zayd was the son of Zayn al-Abidin ibn Ali. So the grandson of Hussein radiallahu anhu again was massacred in the same manner outside Kufa, and I think even in the same place, Karbala. So they did not learn, the whole history repeated itself. And why? Because Zayd was against the Umayyads, against the Abbasides, but Zayd was not cussing or cursing Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and Umar radiallahu anhu. They wanted him to curse Abu Bakr and Umar. He did not do so. The same problem happened and they massacred him as well. Yes?
Why did they want that? Why did they want him to curse?
Because, as I said, from the political movement, it had gone into a religious movement. And from a religious movement, the aqidah was that Ali radiallahu anhu should have been the first caliph. And again, it's off, then it stems from there and the propaganda increased and increased and increased. And this was, yes.
So these are the people who betrayed Hussein radiallahu anhu.
Yeah.
So they wanted them to curse.
These were the progeny of those people who deserted or betrayed Hussein radiallahu anhu. The same people. Same people. خلاص؟ جزاكم الله خير.